That was interesting. Hey, I've got some photos over here.
My name is Vicky Clark. I moved in October, and about 3 weeks after that the event started to happen. I did have two other roommates, but they've both moved out now. One left the course and the other one's found other accommodation. So it's just me on my own now. There was one night, it was quite scary. There was us three girls that stay here, living here, and one of my roommates woke up because she'd heard banging around her head, and she got quite frightened about it. And then she felt something brush over her face. So I got up and turned the light on, and we said, look, there's nothing here, it's all right, we're just being silly, because we were getting worried about it at this point. And so we all sort of calmed down, and we turned the light back off, and then I got into bed. And when I got into bed, there was a toilet roll in my bed. I don't know quite how it got in there, but and then when I woke up in the morning, there was black, like tarry stuff in my bed as well. It was on my pyjamas, and it was on the cover, and it was on the sheet, and it wasn't there when I'd got up to turn the light on, because I'd seen the bed and it was clean. So I don't know where that had come from either. And yeah, one day I went down to the toilet and I locked the door, and when I came back up, it had moved a chair all the way across the room to right behind the door. We tried to work out if someone could have done it, but no one could get their arm round the door to pull the chair in enough. Also, we had some pennies on top of a desk one day, and it just it flicked one and it spun on the floor and then settled down. And also bottles fall off the side, but they don't tip over, they land upright. Also, I went home for a week because I wasn't very well, and the girls next door said they heard a lot of noises coming from the room, but no one was in here because I'm the only one with the key now. No one's ever seen anything. It just seems to move things. We don't quite know why.
I thought for a second there was a jump scare there. I was like waiting for something. It's weird. I think there's nothing else to look at, so I think we're done. Anything over here? Nope. Nope, it's just all for this one spot. We already know it's over there. What's this? Alright. There's some photos over here.
As I looked up, on the top right-hand side window there was what I thought was a face, somebody looking out. And those rooms aren't actually used anymore because, they're rotten, completely rotten. It looked like a child. It looked like just a little boy. It was so quick. It was just as, it was like a blink. It's just like I just don't know. I just don't know. It just looked like a little boy. Other things do happen here. It's the room upstairs. It contains all the cleaning things that we have in the shop, which is the overstock. Normally, things are sort of ruxed about, thrown on the floor. Like we have big 1 kilogram tubs of Swarthega. We had 5 of those broken in different places on the floor upstairs. That was overnight and everything's locked up, obviously, when we go to work, so nobody could have possibly gone in there. Like last year, I was getting some garden furniture and there was somebody walking about upstairs and I needed some help, and I called out and there was nobody there, and it sort of stopped. And when I went back out there, there was somebody pacing about upstairs again, so I ran upstairs and there was nobody there. There's nobody in the room.
When she was about 13, she came down to breakfast one morning and said that she had seen a Roman in a toga in her bedroom. And I thought, oh yes, that sounds a bit far-fetched, a teenage fantasy. But Debbie, later on that day, went out in the garden and was playing and came in with a small coin in her hand, which turned out to be a Roman coin with the head of Septimus Severus on it. So I was quite excited by this because it was quite unusual. And so soon after seeing this Roman in her room, about 3 months later, she had the same experience and saw the same gentleman in her bedroom, and she found the second coin on the site, and soon afterwards she saw him again and found the third coin on the site. Now all the coins had the same head, the head of Septimus Severus on them. Once was unusual, twice was coincidence, 3 times was a bit more than coincidence. And although I've never experienced or seen Septimus Severus there at all, we do have funny things happen in the house, like the curtains have been taken down, all sorts of odd things of that nature. And I believe that Debbie saw him because she happens to be susceptible to these things.
That's interesting. I think we're done with this room now, so let's leave. There's some things here, so let's choose door number 1. Let's not choose door number 1. What door number 2? Oh. Goody. Well, this must be the kitchen. Let's see. A flask.
Justice is often blind, and there are some who would sooner take the law into their own hands than see a crime go unpunished. The case of Nell Cook, the servant of a canon of Canterbury Cathedral, plainly illustrates the dangers of setting oneself up as judge, jury, and executioner. Nell Cook tended house for the new canon of Canterbury Cathedral as best she could, and was rewarded for her diligence and devotion by deceit and gross impropriety. She had not always felt this way, and when the canon gave his first mass in the cathedral, she was suitably impressed by the character of her new employer. The old canon, who mercifully passed away after many years of ill health, was a kind but ineffectual cleric, more concerned with getting his meals on time than spreading the word of the Lord. Now, here before her was clearly a man of passion, who had directed his considerable energies and charisma in the service of the church, and yet there was something about the new canon, like the way he would never look her in the eye before he went to visit parishioners who had sought advice in spiritual matters, or his often extreme moodiness and irritability after returning from some of these calls. Nell put this down to his youth and passionate temperament, but she would soon find out the depths of his feelings. The canon was a man who kept odd hours, and it was difficult for Nell to arrange meals at set times. One evening, after watching the stew she had laboured over all afternoon grow cold on the dresser, she decided to wait for him to come home so that she could broach the matter forthwith. Late that night, Nell was drifting in and out of sleep in the kitchen when she heard the scuffle of feet and whispered giggling from the drawing-room upstairs. She couldn't believe it was the canon. She crept up the stairs to catch a glimpse of the intruders, and was sickened to the stomach by the sight that greeted her eyes. The young canon, obviously inebriated, was on the settle, being very familiar with a young woman. But the real shock came when the priest's companion turned around, revealing herself as none other than his own niece. Nell could bear the scene no longer, and stole off to her own room to a fitful rest. In the morning, the niece was nowhere to be seen, and the canon seemed in particularly high spirits. His hypocrisy appalled Nell, and she had to take her leave with some feeble excuse about tending to something on the stove. In the kitchen, her sanctuary, Nell brooded over the night's events. She decided to bide her time, as this might be an isolated indiscretion, not uncommon amongst men of the cloth. But deep down she feared the worst, and her instincts was soon borne out. The canon's niece started making more frequent calls on her uncle at his quarters, and their conduct together became more brazen and unforgivable. It was not something Nell could discuss with anyone else, so she resolved to deal with the matter herself. One evening, when she expected the canon's niece for dinner, she expressly made the priest his favourite meal, mutton pie, emptying a bottle of arsenic into the filling, and grimly smiling at the irony of it all. After serving the pie to them, Nell waited by the dining-room door, wondering at the effects of her special repast, but nothing happened. After the meal, which seemed to go on forever, the canon congratulated her on an excellent dinner, as usual, and said that he and his niece would retire to the study where she would help him work on tomorrow's sermon. Nell hurried to the kitchen to check that she had used the right bottle, when she heard a cry from above, the study. The poison must be doing its mischief, and so Nell took her time responding to the desperate pleas for help. When she reached the room, she found the canon and his niece writhing on the floor in agony, foam the colour of sage forming around their mouths, and their eyes wide with terror and supplication. But Nell simply watched them with a curious detachment, as if none of this was really happening, bade them good night, and retired to bed. Yet her awakening was violent, wresting her from a deep slumber. Upon opening her eyes, she saw a crowd of people in her room, all speaking in agitated tones, and the most vehement amongst them was the man now shaking her roughly by the shoulders. Still drowsy, Nell could not fathom what her assailant was babbling, but when he mentioned the poison, the hairs rose on the back of her neck, and she recalled her actions of the previous night. It all seemed like a dream. Now, fully roused, she attempted to explain, to defend herself, but those gathered in her room were well past listening and only sought vengeance for the slaying of their priest. Nell was dragged from bed and into the streets, where the people who had once been her friends and neighbours turned on her with a viciousness that was breathtaking. Stones caught her in the head and chest, forcing her to her knees, blood pouring freely from a gash on her cheek, and still it rained stones, pounding her into the ground, her arms uselessly hanging by her sides, and then succumbed to the darkness. If only that were the end of it. On regaining consciousness, Nell found herself at the bottom of a deep pit, looking up at her tormentors, some of whom had shovels in their hands. She desperately tried to raise herself, railing against her attackers and accusing the priest of terrible sins, but their response to this blasphemy was a clump of earth that hit her hard in the face, filling her mouth and choking off her appeal. And then the next mound of dirt landed on her, and the next, until her body was covered by damp, cool soil. The last thing she saw through the clod of mud clinging to her cheeks was the poison bottle being thrown into the grave with her. And then the darkness truly closed in. Forever. The passage between the old infirmary cloister and the Green Court in Canterbury Cathedral is known as the Dark Entry, and Nell Cook's spirit is said to wander through this foreboding corridor, lamenting the injustice of her fate. It is also said that any who look upon the wretched apparition will soon taste death themselves.
I love story time with Christopher Lee. Anyway, that was pretty interesting. It's like fucking amazing unluckiness. Getting screwed over for screwing someone else over. Karma. It's a bitch. I love it. Hey, look, photos. Oh, I guess it's no commentary. Let's talk over this then. Yes. Nice window. Yeah. Looks like a freaking hubcap. Oh, hey, look, it's that. Yeah. Ooh, and there's um faces. That's a tree. That's a tree. Oh, hey, it's the picture for the start of the game. Is that your form of jump scare game? Didn't work. She's scared though. Yes, those are vines, and that is a door. Good job. I don't even know what that is. I think it's a fucking window with broken wall. Neat. Well, I found my Skype image. Yep, nice house. A purse in a hole. So I think it's a purse. Gargoyle. Weird gargoyle. A barred window. Opening. Door knocker. Yes. Yes. Are these like images for the design of this game or something like that, or just random images they found? Those are stairs. If that's stairs in this game, then yeah, there must be. It has to. Okay. Another image of a haunted mansion of fog. Okay. Yes. Ooh. Ah. Hmm. Okay, are you just taking the piss now? I think they were taking the piss for that last one. There's no way that was like a fucking genuine thing they just legit did there to be spoopy. What's this? A glove. There's nothing with the glove. It's just a glove. Tap. Blood. My god. I can't interact with this. Dang. Um. Okay. What's in here? Pumpkin. Oh, that scared the shit out of me. No. What these bags? No. Nothing's really happening. Actually, when the water gets, yeah, maybe if I, no, dang. Um, what about this? Cute. 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 Can I... Oh. Yes.
If you have ever broken a glass whilst drinking, you will have experienced an omen of death.
Ooh. Spoopy. Look, eyes. They watch. That's about it, I think. We can click on that, but it doesn't really do anything. It's also this, but again, there's like nothing. Nothing at all. Well, oh, chair. Yes, chair. Well, let's go upstairs. Door. Well, here we are here. Believers. There are people all over the world who have devoted their lives to the task of providing to the skeptics that ghosts and spirits exist. Yes. Jane Hartley, a new person, is a skeptic, a one-time skeptic. And there's Nuttall, and Furman, and Cornell. Oh, Cornell. Are we going to be getting some Cornell? I think we're going to be getting some Cornell.
Well, I think it would certainly say that ghosts and hauntings actually exist. There are far too many numerous occurrences of things happening just simply to be able to dismiss them. And the fact is that we've actually got prayer books, rituals, etc., with various sort of little services to try and help to cope with those situations where people are perhaps disturbed by them. So Catholic Church, and I would say probably the whole broad Christian church as well, would actually say yes. There are various phenomena that we experience that can't be actually put down to something which is tangible and visible. That's the way we are. I mean, we're actually moving, I suppose, most of the time as a church in a sort of spiritual plane. We're dealing with a God, first of all, who's not directly visible to us. We have round about the church various sort of images, like stained glass images with angels on, etc. So yeah, we're always talking about things which are non-physical. If I can too, I mean, it's not language which is unfamiliar to us, certainly from the scriptures itself, and in the very end chapter of Luke's Gospel there, this is just after Easter Sunday, and Jesus appears to the disciples. Now, he's been dead 1 minute and suddenly he appears, and they're frightened. And he says to them, "Why are you so agitated? Why are these doubts rising in your hearts? Look at my hands and feet. Yes, it is I indeed. Touch me and see. A ghost has no flesh and bones, as you see I have." So the language itself is quite familiar to us.
But this particular night, perfectly ordinary night, I went to bed around 11ish, which was normal for us. Went into the room, went to sleep, you know, perfect, nothing odd about the night. The room was dark because it was quite high up, so the street lighting didn't shine a bright light in there, but you could distinguish the shapes of all the furniture, and colours were in terms of shades of grey and black. You couldn't have picked out colour in the light. Anyway, I'd gone to sleep, and I don't know how long I'd been asleep or quite when I woke up. It was still dark, and I woke up and I sort of just laid there and I thought, oh God, what's wrong with me? I felt really ill. I felt sort of slightly sick, slightly feverish, just very, very odd. And I sort of laid there feeling uneasy, and I thought, God, I'm really ill, there's something really wrong. Thinking I'm going to have to phone the other co-worker at the other house to get somebody to come round. I turned over in the bed, I'd been facing the wall. I turned over and had my eyes open, and there was a figure of a woman stood maybe 2-3 feet away from the bed. She seemed quite tall, but then I was laid down in the bed and she was stood up. Her silhouette was very simple, sort of shape, long dress, sort of seemed to be quite high-necked. Her face I could distinguish was paler, but I couldn't see her features clearly, and her head was in my direction, and I very much felt that she was looking at me, and I was absolutely petrified. I was really, really scared, and she just didn't move. She just stood there. I mean, I can't remember whether her arms were by her side or in front of her. She was very still, and I didn't even debate in my head, you're not seeing this. I knew I was seeing it, and I was very frightened. And the problem was, I was completely trapped. The bed was in the corner of the room, the door was sort of over here, and she was stood in between. And there's no way I was going to get out of that bed to pass her or even attempt to go around her. I can't express how frightened I was. So I just got my head under the duvet, and I stayed under the duvet, sweated it out, until I thought morning must be here, and I kept sort of peering out, waiting for the light to come. The light came, I got my clothes, and I left that room. The next day, of course, at 9 o'clock in the morning, the co-worker from the other house came round, and it had really shaken me up. I was still sort of feeling strange and very, very depressed, and the feeling from her was one of total desolation, and I just felt so depressed, and I'm not a depressed person at all. And I said to the other co-worker, I'd actually told him I'd had a dream, because I'd decided at this point it must have been a nightmare, a dream. And I told him, and just said, God, I couldn't sleep last night, and this happened, I saw this, I was so scared. And he just looked at me and said, don't say any more, you've got to speak to this guy called Ken. And he wouldn't sort of elaborate. He said, wait till Ken comes in this afternoon, to take over. So I waited, this guy came in, and I said to him, I think I had this really weird dream, dreamt that I saw a ghost, I think. And he said, oh, what did she look like? And I knew when he said that, what did she look like, that he'd seen it. So I described what I'd seen, and he and the other co-worker was sat there as well, just smiling all the time, and apparently every detail tallied. But this guy, Ken, had seen her much clearer. He'd watched her, he hadn't been as frightened as I was, and he watched her disappear through the wall. And the second time he saw her was in broad daylight. There was a full-length mirror on the wall. He had his foot on a chair, tying his shoelace one morning, looked up to sort of just fluff his hair, and there she was in the reflection of the mirror, and she just disappeared. She melted away, she didn't move away from him. And as I say, every detail tallied, though his description was much clearer because he'd seen her in daytime. And I never slept in that room again. I wouldn't sleep. There was a smaller sort of cupboard, and I slept in that. I wouldn't go in that room again because I was so frightened.
And it's no good our friendly scientists saying it's all hallucination, because it isn't. And I'm inclined to think that when people say it's all hallucination, all rubbish, they find the problem too difficult to solve, and that's one of the challenges. Solving it, explaining it. It may be that we will never explain it. Perhaps there is another dimension, perhaps these things are from spirits, perhaps there is a life after death, perhaps people do come back. I'm not too happy with that one, but if you're an investigator, you've got to balance it.
On one occasion we used it when there was something really there. We used it in a deserted church. We fired the beam of light at a swirling green, ominous mist, which exploded into trillions of glistening lights and rushed out of the door and disappeared. Now, we saw it, believe it or believe it not, that doesn't matter to me.
That is so eerie. I'm fucking good. Fucking hell. What's the bottom of the phone here? A mirror. The drawer. The squad and the bed. I'm sorry. I'm talking about. Oh, hey. Good. I want to fucking ask you like that. Go back. Go back. I want to fucking activate the pictures. Yeah.
Well, I think the simple, almost a dictionary definition of what are ghosts would be something along the lines of a disembodied spirit of somebody who's obviously died.
I think a ghost is something constructed by one's own mind, a mental image, a mental construction that is seen in the context of the ordinary world, an eyes open apparition. It's easy enough when you shut your eyes to have mental images against a blank background. It's harder for most people to have them in front of the filing cabinet, the piano, whatever it is. But I think that's precisely what a ghost is, and that's why they look the way they do.